here we go. And good afternoon, everybody. It's the 14th of August, 2026. And there's three people on the screen, Lisa and Mirko and myself, Luke Harris. Lisa, how are you?
Excellent. My dance group is back happening for the next semester. So I've been enjoying banging to music and whatnot. So yeah, it's been a good week.
And what is the dance of choice?
Well, we sort of do jazz, commercial jazz. That's what it's called, commercial jazz and hip hop. And it's a bit of an upbeat song, so it's going to be fun.
Nice. And Mirko, what sort of dancing do you do?
The dancing that I do is as soon as someone like Lisa walks on the dance floor, I walk off out of embarrassment because I've seen her type before, and so it definitely showing me up on the dance. I'm out of here.
I've seen you do that, Mirko. I've seen you.
That's right. It's got that. There's not many moves in the repertoire, that's for sure.
As long as you're not doing that one, buddy.
Oh, exactly. And Luke, you just came back from seeing quite a few clients. I think it was Gold Coast, Brisbane, Cairns. We seem to half of Victoria's left up north, so we have to go and see clients up there these days. How'd you go?
Mate, it was a wonderful couple of weeks up there, I must admit. From that point of view, yeah, look, very busy. Good news is the sun is shining in Queensland, and that sunny one day, perfect the next. Yeah, there was a bit of that. So nice to feel this warmth on your back, and very much looking forward to spring in Melbourne, because coming back here was bloody cold.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, mate. How about you give us a bit of an update on the market?
Yeah, so had a look at the markets, and we're unusually late on a Friday, so it's like running at 2 p.m. now, so we've only got a couple of hours to go, and I was kind of hoping we'd have a decent day, but we haven't. It's the market's off about 0.7 in Australia today. And a lot going on in the news. We'll talk about the RBA and rates a bit later. But if I sort of just quick snapshot over the last week, US S&P's up 0.5, the Nasdaq's up 0.4. We're off about 1.5 as it stands right now. And I did some cheeky numbers here, because I'm sort of getting frustrated with looking at what the numbers have looked like Australia versus globally and the like. And if I just took year to date, so the US S&P 500's up best part of 14%, the Nasdaq's up 15%, and here we're at 3.8% during that period. And I thought, okay, let's not be too brutal, so let's extend that to sort of a 5-year period just to get a sense. Have a look at these numbers: 74% S&P 500, 80% the Nasdaq, 18% in Australia. It just goes to show, how we've sort of lagged from a growth perspective in Australia, and we're certainly suffering from not having exposure to a lot of the IT, the AI sector, all the rest of it. But again, sort of reinforces the importance of looking at your portfolios at a global level, as opposed to just looking at in your own backyard and worrying about domestic bias. So yeah, I thought they were interesting numbers, and it seems to be a continuing theme. You'd like to think Australia can sort of snap back at some stage, and thank God for dividends is all I say. That we've got a bit of a free kick there that sort of adds a little bit of positivity to those numbers.
No, you're right. They definitely do add a bit of positivity, but I think it is it's probably a stark reminder to the Australian market and to Australian companies as to that they need to get off off the couch, so to speak, and actually start to innovate and start to grow and start to develop and be things that they're capable of doing. Like Australia is a great place to invest, from a regulatory point of view, from a governmental point of view, and all that kind of stuff. It is a safe place to invest and a safe place to do business, but we're not really, encouraging that sort of behaviour. And I think my bigger concern too is in the recent budget, there wasn't really much by way of incentives to actually go and do those sorts of things as well. So that compounds the problem a little bit further. Okay, just on the market side of things this week, we noticed that the RBA held rates at 4.35. Great reprieve for people with mortgages. Stay of execution, or is this a sign of things to come, that the economy is slowing? What are we thinking?
Yeah, look, I think the RBA and then following on, Michelle Bullock had a sort of press conference and warned sort of on the property prices side of things as well, sort of saying that we expect to potentially see a little bit more pullbacks and the like. But the language is still very consistent about concerns with inflation, the oil price, and that flowing through to other sectors of the economy, which basically equals more inflation. And so the RBA was very firm at, although it was a unanimous decision to hold at 4.35. I don't think that another rise is out of the question, to be perfectly honest. Just listening to what they've had to say. So let's see what happens next.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Lisa, we've noticed that on the property market, property prices have been a little bit soft, and there's a lot of people yelling and screaming in the press. I've noticed from that point of view. Do you think is from your point of view, you've been around the industry for a long time, like we all have. From that end, in your view, is this more an interest rate thing, or is this because on the back of government policy? What do you think is causing the price softness?
Yeah, a lot of the softness was already happening in places like Melbourne and Sydney before those announcements. So earlier in the year, it was the rate rises seemed to put the fear of God into people. And if you reduces your loan amount, then you're sort of stuck, even if the prices start trimming back. You get a few in a row like that, and pretty much you're going to have a big pullback. It's just threw another spanner in the works, didn't it, to then make those announcements with the budget changes. And then an interesting one, one of the local realtors around here was talking about lots of sales getting squashed in certain types of property into May, June, trying to beat some of the changes in identification requirements. So Australia has long been considered actually one of the worst internationally for our protections against anti-money laundering and things of that nature. Property is finally needing to show who's buying it. And so there has been a bit of a grind to a halt in July and August, apparently, with the realtors as well. So it's been a bit of an interesting time that is short to say. And the banks, they're just coming out with their results at present. We saw CBA and ANZ both coming out with slump in their books, and the worst of which I think was Westpac with 20% less loans than usual. So they're certainly feeling the pressure of people pulling back, sitting back and waiting. Even within our own client base, talking to a couple of clients thinking to be buying in for the first time, not feeling the rush at the moment, which is a nice place for them, especially if at the moment the stock levels are a bit down. What did happen in the last week or so, some of the numbers came through from places like Perth and Brisbane, which had still been holding up with their prices, hadn't actually really experienced a drop, and that they had their first couple of months of drops finally coming through also on those markets. So that might better reflect the budget changes as opposed to just what the rate rises are doing too.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Poor old CBA guys. The loan book was off about 15% in new loan applications, but they did declare a $10.98 billion profit for the year. So they just think, I reckon they're going to hang in there. They might make it.
That is a money-making machine, the CBA. I've got to give them that. And I think the other thing there too is on the property side, I think it's always important to have perspective. I love waking up in the morning and you turn on Today, you turn on Sunrise, and you think the world's falling apart. Chicken Little. And, it would be nice if Channel 9 and Channel 7 perhaps said that they were sponsored by Domain or the relevant real estate connections, because maybe that's probably the reason why they're angry and they're not getting the revenue that they were getting for previously. But the reality is, property prices have grown by, 200, 300, 400% over the last 10, 15 years. In the last 5 years alone, it's been exponential in terms of the growth. So you're always going to hand a little bit back. That's just common sense. And sure, people who bought in the last 3 months, 6 months, whatever it might be, they might be feeling some negative equity, but none of the banks in their reports came out and said, we're going to go and challenge these people who are in negative equity. So, we seem to be talking about something that doesn't really exist, I think.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that we have learned about the banks is as ruthless as they are, and as like you said, as they are money-making machines when it comes to profit and the like, they are not in the business of taking people's homes. And you know why? Because they can't. right? And it's a bit like, a mortgage book that is, valued at 10, 15 billion bucks. You cannot call that mortgage book in one go. You have to work your way through that. So I think that investors can take some positivity out of that to sort of say that as much as the doomsday is there, but they actually cannot do that, right? They it's not possible for them. So
the other thing there too is that the banks are not in the business of owning homes. They're in the business of helping people own homes, but themselves owning the home, that they're not in the business of doing that. So the last thing they want to do is bring all these homes into their own book and go, well, we're going to control these outcomes. So I think, Lisa, I think your summation of it was on point. A lot of it's interest rate related. Yes, the changes in the budget have definitely driven, I think, investors out of the market to a certain degree. Will investors come back? They'll come back when it's compelling enough for them to do so. And until either the yield improves, which I think could be a problem for the government down track, I think that's probably the unintended consequence of this new policy. I think rentals could be a bit of a problem moving forwards, I'd suggest.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to put it out there into the world that you're making some changes to make housing more affordable, I mean, fundamentally, what does that mean? The prices have to come down. So I think the language has been a little bit too oblique and not direct enough with the Australian electorate lately. That correction for a while.
Lately. now.
That language maybe needed to be a little bit more forceful. I mean, we see within our own client bases, 60 and 70-year-old clients, worried about their 30 and 40-year-olds getting into the market and kicking them out of the house eventually, So it's live and kicking in certain parts of the community, but
of course it is.
Yeah. The other thing that sort of struck during the week in the banking sector, which was interesting, was HSBC, a big international bank, announcing that they're really exiting out of this sort of home loan arena. So they're actually selling off their book, $36 billion home and personal loan book, and over 18 months winding out of credit cards and savings accounts. Going to still be a bit in the institutional space, corporate space with banking, but really divesting themselves of that sort of maybe it's the risk of individual loans, home loans, personal loans, and certainly credit cards. They've sold off their loan book, announced selling it to Blackstone. So often there is an appetite amongst private equity to repackage and then move on. So that was probably a pretty big announcement during the week, and maybe gives us an idea of profitability of the banks moving forward. And while the CBA announced a nice profit, that there maybe is a perception that there's some headwinds with the overall sort of situation in Australia.
And their retail model was sort of, they had branches and the like, in shopping centres and things like that. And I think that, we're seeing it from the big four here as well, that it's just simply not profitable for them, And
HSBC are closing 19 branches. So quite significant. Yeah.
I think there's two bits to it. Firstly, the competition. Once you start to dilute competition, it just means that that's not good for consumers. So that's the first issue. So that's a problem. The second bit, I think, is probably more the bigger issue, where you sit back and you go, well, is this reflective of the size of Australia in terms of the market? Is the market just too small? And if the market is too small, and this is probably, going back to your initial statement there, Mirko, in the sense of 80% returns on the US exchange versus 18% here in Australia over a 5-year term, that's a big issue.
Yeah, look, we certainly don't make it easy to do business and actually be profitable in some of these areas, and unfortunately, it'll probably be the consumer that suffers the most from this, because it just adds more power to the big four, and you may as well throw in Macquarie and the like, But the reality is banking is tough if you're not playing in the right spaces, and I think HSBC sort of just want to now focus on the institutional stuff and at the big end of town, and sort of stay clear of transactional banking. Reminds me of the time there was a lobby here in the area to get a local Bendigo Bank branch. And I was listening to the Bendigo person speak, and they were sort of saying, well, what we need is like commitments on loans and all the rest of it. And people were like, everyone was pretty shy to sort of say anything about it. And in the end, I just said, I think I put a few shopkeepers offside. I said, guys, they're not going to open up a branch so that they can break $20 notes when you run out of change, right? That's the reality. And I think that HSBC finds themselves in the same spot. If all you're going to do is have a counter to make life easy for people that need a transaction card, you're not going to make any money out of that either.
Yeah. In some other big news this week, Ben Carroll, new Premier of Victoria, is talking about rolling back, or actually, no, let's not say that. No, he's not talking about rolling back. He's deferred the start date for working from home rules to well after next July, I think, with the view being that the plan is to review that legislation, to sit back and go, well, okay, does it still make sense? And to work closer with business to come up with something which is more workable and more accommodating. Good call, bad call? What do we think?
Oh, it's definitely good for an election, isn't it?
No surprises past November. The kick the can was gone beyond November.
That's me thinking you're being cynical, Lisa. Fair enough. So, Mirko, in terms of the decision here by Ben Carroll to do that sort of stuff, he's clearly trying to differentiate himself from Jacinta Allen and from what they were doing previously from that end. We are in August, the election's in November. It kind of feels like we're kind of a bit late to the party, don't you think?
Yeah, it does. And I do feel like because the wheels are, in motion, and because we've had, so much momentum on this, I don't know, regardless of what you do legislatively, how this is going to fix the issue. There was some surprising stuff put out by JLL and CBRE during the week that I was having a bit of read on, and just some extraordinary numbers. So the Victorian government is pretty much set to abandon 100,000 square metres of office space next financial year. And and I think it was like 5 or 6 equivalent MCG playing fields when you think about floor space from that point of view. And what we found is that there used to be this concept of one desk per worker. That's now turned on its head, and now the thinking is it's probably more like at 60%, which means that for every 100 workers you may have 60 desks. And there was an interesting number here, and I've always been banging on about it and sort of said if you can look after the public sector, you're half a chance coming election time. There's 394,000 public sector employees, which makes up nearly 10% of the state workforce. So combine that with the work from home legislation, combine that with the huge amount of office space that's going to be freed up. That's a really big speed hump for Melbourne CBD. That is a real problem, and the only way we can have a vibrant city is with people in it, and that we're just not seeing it.
There is a demographic issue with the election, though. The sort of average voter in Victoria, I might not get the age perfect, but is a female aged 38 with children, and so they're the people who benefit most from some work from home. Yeah. And there was certainly a client of mine about 12 months ago decided to quit working for the state government because they were reversing their policy and were requiring her to be back in the office. And so she just went, right, I'm looking for work elsewhere now. Yeah, so interesting.
Look, I think, and I think we've debated this online many times over. The reality is working from home is a wonderful initiative, and I think it's something that should be applicable to each employer and each employee to work out an arrangement that works best for them. Having this system legislated where it's just an automatic rule, and you just kind of sit there and go, well, how do you actually manage this? How do you actually control this? It just doesn't make sense. And I think everything's got to be horses for courses, because that kind of makes sense. But look, credit to Ben Carroll at least, and not that he deserves too much credit, but credit to him for at least having a go. Interestingly enough, today, just as we were coming online, the news has filtered through that Jacinta Allen has decided to quit politics entirely. So she won't be recontesting her seat, citing a commitment to family and wanting to spend more time with those near and dear and so on. I guess me being the cynic probably kind of thinks that she wasn't going to win her seat in the first place. Is that a fair call, Mirko, do you think? Or
Yeah, get out while you can. I think is more the case. It's not going to affect your lifetime pension, so get yeah. I'm out of here. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised.
I
They're,
saw
they're,
a timeline of her career, and she's been around a long time. You don't want the last entry on that timeline to be, I lost my final election.
yeah.
That's true. It's not good on the CV.
Yeah.
I reckon you've nailed it, Lisa. I reckon you've nailed it in terms of the motivation there. Now, it'd be remiss of us not to have a chat about Donald Trump and the excitement of the Trump administration on Weekly Wrap. And look, just maybe some quick highlight bullet points in terms of what we can do, and then we can delve into whatever we want to talk about from that end. Trump's peace plan with Iran is still a work in progress, as we all know. What I do know is that Netanyahu came back to Trump and said, "Not on your life," with a lot of the 15 points that were raised. So, whilst we were close and we were on the verge, and I think Iran was desperate for a deal, guess what? We're nowhere near it. So let's just leave that alone. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump and Anthony Albanese, our Prime Minister, had a chat on the phone, the two, and then they get along like a house on fire, apparently. No, it's all great between the two, with Donald Trump actually providing an assurance that he would go back and reconsider the tariffs that he's just imposed on Australia of 12.5, with the view being that they could be removed entirely. This on-off again scenario just makes no sense to anybody, and economically the chaos that it causes is just nuts. And what we've also seen this week in the Trump administration is we've seen Caroline Levitt, the person that gets up and speaks on behalf of the president at the press club on a day-to-day basis from that point of view, and interacts with the press. And she's very good at her job and very good at telling telling you what she wants you to hear from that point of view. She's decided to resign unexpectedly after just coming back from maternity leave. So a lot happening in the Trump administration this week.
Well, I think going back to Albanese today, perhaps Trump saw the interview about the melons and felt like there was a real connection between the two men. I suspect that would have been the personal discussion as well as the boring bits about AUKUS and tariffs. So sure that would have been great to sit on the wall and listen to that conversation.
Well played, Lisa.
Well played. Kudos to you. And look, whilst we're on this thing about Trump, people would have heard the story this week. There was when Trump was over there for the in Europe for the recent conference that they had. From that point of view, there was a threat to life, which invariably he gets a lot. And I think Iran had made a fairly substantial threat, and they had threatened to take out the main plane from that point of view. So there was a picture of Donald Trump getting onto the presidential plane, walking into the presidential plane, and then getting into a food truck, or not getting. You didn't see him get into the food truck, but clearly he's got into a food truck from that point of view, and he was taken away to fly on a different plane, whilst everybody else was left on that said plane to fly home, clearly under the threat of being taken out of the sky. Now, on that plane, we had Caroline Levitt, who just had a 1-month-old sitting at home. So I dare say she probably reconsidered her career. And the likes of Rubio and the likes of Hegseth and all the media and God knows what. You wouldn't want to be Trump's friend, would you?
This reminds me of that Italian captain on the Costa Concordia. Remember when that ship was actually sinking, right. and he bailed and left people on board before the evacuation was finished, and then claimed at the end of it, after the Coast Guard was screaming down the radio saying get back on board, he goes, I tripped and fell into a lifeboat. That's how I ended up in there. So yeah, maybe President Trump tripped and ended up in a food truck that sailed off into the distance. I don't know. It just not impressive from our fearless leader, eh? As for those previous points on all the peace deals and that, I've actually given up listening to all that. I just watch the oil price now, and I just go above 80, no good. Below 80, we're getting somewhere. That seems to be the going rate at the moment. It's unfortunately come to that, really.
I really feel that everybody is ignoring the words that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth, really. It's just nonsense. It's just whatever thing pops into his head. It makes no difference today or tomorrow. Fundamentally, Iran is in a position of power, negotiating with Oman to directly control the strait. And Trump started that conversation. what foolishness this will turn out to be in the longer term potentially.
Yeah, look, I think you're right there, Lisa. But look, the interesting thing is the markets are holding up, which is staggering. So that's been a good thing. So at least that's a bonus. All right, guys, just mindful of time. It's been a big week, I dare say. So, Lisa, you got anything special planned?
Well, my husband's playing at Bird's Basement tomorrow night. It's all sold out.
There you go.
So they're all very happy. A couple of people contacted me going, I can't get tickets, but oh well, next time, guys. Yeah, so that's going to be good time, and yeah, just catching up with other friends and family outside of that. Yeah.
Nice, beautiful. What about you, Mirko? Have you got anything planned this weekend?
Nothing too serious. Maybe a long run tomorrow morning to clear my head. It's been a big week. So, yeah, we'll try and hit the road before the sun comes up and get out there.
I did notice last week, mate, and I was paying attention to your Strava stats because I'm a bit of a stats man. 18 kilometres last week.
Yeah, it took a wrong turn somewhere. I was feeling super confident at the 11K mark, which probably wasn't a good idea at the time, but all good.
Most people buy a new car, mate.
Yeah, that's true. What about you, Luke? What do you got on?
We're hosting a dinner tomorrow night with some friends, and it'd be nice to catch up with those guys and sit back and celebrate. And then the kids and my darling wife are going to have a bit of fun with me on Sunday. We're coming up, I guess, with from a work point of view, they're sitting back going, okay, I'm coming to that point of another year around the sun from a work perspective. So they just turned around and said, okay, let's just catch up for a lunch. So that'll be nice with them as well.
Awesome.
So yeah, nice and simple. All right, guys. Well, look, thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you for your contribution as always to our wonderful team. Thank you as well. We love the work that you do, and we're very appreciative of that. And to our clients, never change. Keep on making us smile. Keep on making us laugh, because there's lots of that. And we'll see you next week. All the very best. Take care, guys.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.